Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Dental Realist Podcast. We appreciate you joining us tonight, and we are really excited about tonight's show. We have a really special guest. We've been looking forward to this show for a couple of weeks now. So before we get to our special guest, let me introduce my friends and co-hosts, Dr. Marcus D. Neff and Dr. Troy Stevens. Marcus, how's it going tonight?
Going great. Enjoying things here in sunny southeast Idaho.
Good. And Troy, you are back after missing an episode last week. You were camping, we think, and you're back alive and better than ever, right?
Yeah, that's what I told you guys I was doing.
Yeah.
No, we went camping last week and had a good time, had a week off, and yeah, I was kind of sad that I missed the episode last week, but it went really well.
Yeah, you guys
did a great job.
Yeah, you were the only one that was sad about that.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys were happy.
No, we did miss you. So tonight, our special guest, we're going to be joined by Brian Trecek. He is the Director of Admissions at Marquette University School of Dentistry. And Brian, how's it going tonight? We really appreciate you taking the time to be on our podcast.
It's awesome. It's a great honor for me to be invited to be with you guys tonight. And for anybody that's listening to this podcast, I just want everybody to know that these three guys' successful careers are all because of me.
And that is true.
Absolutely. Everything we've done, we contribute to you.
Yeah. I do remember that Brian came to my school, Weber State University, interviewed me there, and I had never felt so comfortable in an interview. It was like he was selling me on Marquette, and I'm like ready to beg him to accept me into dental school. So,
and I remember. I think I was begging Brian to please accept me because I had been rejected everywhere else.
And I was in the same boat.
No, Marquette's a fantastic school. I was honored to be selected to come to that school.
Yeah, that is true.
Brian, I don't know if you remember John Wood. He's a class of 2002. He was a classmate of mine in high school, and actually was pretty happy to get accepted out there because he was out there. Of course, all of us graduated in 2003, but it was kind of cool to be able to be in dental school with someone who I went to high school with.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome.
Yep.
Well, guys, let's get into the questions tonight. We're just going to dive right into it here. This is, I don't know whether to be nervous, excited. I'm just all of the above, I guess. So, Brian, we're just going to throw some questions at you, and you can just ramble on and answer as you see fit. So,
I'm ready to go.
Let's do it. So, Brian, what makes a dental school applicant unique and stand out? What can they do before they apply to dental school to really jump off the paper at you when you're reading their application and going through things?
Yeah, guys, that's a very typical question, and I think sometimes that the answer that you'll get from an admissions guy is maybe sometimes not as sexy as a lot of people think. I talk a lot about sort of a total package. I don't think that there's necessarily any one thing that makes somebody stick out. I think sometimes that's it's maybe akin to the minutia of a personal statement. What do I put in a personal statement that makes me stand out? It's a little bit different than calling an HR guy and saying, how do I get my resume on the top of the pile? So I think what dental applicants need to do is they need to think of a total package. They need to be, we'll probably talk about this in different ways throughout the night, but a person certainly needs to be a good student. They need to be a good test taker. They certainly need to have and convince dental school admissions committees that they know something about dentistry and that they have a passion and a dedication to doing this. That's an important piece for people like us who have thousands of people to select from that are all smart. But we got to know that these people also have a spark and that they're so passionate about dentistry. You guys went through dental school, right? I say a lot of times that if we painted a perfect, crystal clear picture of what 4 years of dental school is going to be like, maybe a third of the people that do it wouldn't. And that's probably weird for a guy like me to say, but you got to want it bad to get through the times when you get stretched. So I think all of those things in a package deal, not that there's a person that does one thing really well, it's a person that does all of the things they need to do well, and those are the things that I think become important. But as much as we talk, and we'll talk tonight about a holistic review of a file, there's nothing more important to getting into dental school in 2016 and beyond than being a good student. Take tough courses and get good grades. If you don't do that, you need a lot of other lipstick to cover that up to make it stronger.
Brian, this is Marcus.
Yeah.
Ever had an applicant who didn't enjoy working with their hands? Have you not seen that on the
That's right.
Well, I hope not. I mean, I think that's another one of the things, Marcus, that becomes a critical part of this process. And, of course, what's difficult about that is in many places, we struggle with this at Marquette, and this is where sometimes sharing best practices with other schools is important. But, we're very didactically based as it relates to the admission process. We don't have you go in and do a crown prep during your interview for dental school. Sure. And so sometimes we have a lot of people who are extremely bright, but when they get to the clinical or simulation lab side of dental school, some of those people that are really smart aren't very good with their hand skills. So there's no question that hand-eye coordination, having skill sets, doing things that you've done to develop dexterity, that's an important part of this process that I think a lot of, certainly clinical schools like Marquette, that's an important variable for us to have.
Very good.
Going back to that real quick, Brian, is there anything that, that people put on applications that help you kind of determine if they may have those hand skills or not? I mean, a lot of those folks, like Marcus kind of was alluding to with that question, we always were told in undergraduate, always put that you really enjoy working with your hands. It's kind of one of those things that you just try and do because, it's really difficult for you guys as admissions to determine, how are they going to perform in that setting.
Right. Yeah, and I think if you guys remember, and maybe the application's changed a bit, but there's a place on the application for dental school that talks about, give this admissions committee some examples of things that you've done to give them insights into your dexterity, your hand skills. So playing instruments, people that do a shop class. You guys remember that. And we used to chuckle when we started to do interviews that guys from Utah would actually bring stuff that they've made and bring portfolios of things that they've drawn or artwork that they've done. And that's not necessarily a silly or unsmart thing to do. But those are examples of ways in which people get people say, I tie my own fishing lures. So sometimes some of that stuff seems crazy, but there's a little bit of a method to those are some things that give us insights into that skill set. Different than someone who says, I've worked in a dental lab and I pour up molds and stuff like that. There's other ways in which people can give us a sense of that manual dexterity.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's good. I wish I actually didn't get that memo before I applied to dental school. I wish I would have had that one. Darn it.
It's a little too late now, buddy.
Too late. Sorry.
So this is Marcus again. When I applied to dental school, I really thought I've got to have these core science classes. So what better way to do that than to get a bachelor's degree in zoology?
Right.
But that's not necessarily true, I think. Because some of our classmates were coming into dental school, they got the core classes taken, but their bachelor's degree was in something unrelated to science.
Yeah, no question. Again, that's an incredibly common question that we get, and the sort of the old 23-year-old stock answers I always give people is if I had a brandy snifter on my desk and I had $1 for every time someone said, I hear you have to be a biology major to go to dental school, I'd be rich. I could retire and travel the world. I think that the critical element on all of that stuff, and most of the people that that will listen to this podcast and are looking at dental school know that one of the pretty much universal kinds of things to make yourself a minimally qualified candidate for dental school is you have to take bio, chem, OChem, physics, biochem now, you guys at Marquette, and English. So to do that, you can't really go to school and graduate with a major in the natural sciences and not take those classes. But the point of the matter is that if anybody ever said to me, do I have to major in the natural sciences to get into dental school? The answer is no. You can be a music major and go to dental school. You just have to be a music major that's going to take, those science classes along with it, and most people don't do that. The other question I get sometimes, they'll say, okay, if there's one space left in the class and there's a candidate that's looking for that position that was a natural science major and one that wasn't, would you lean toward the natural science major? And I think I would answer that question in a gray way. Maybe, but not necessarily. You wanted to let me ramble on. Let me also tell you this. I've heard things like this for a very, very long time. Sometimes people will meet. You guys are dentists now, and you probably get a lot of people who are applying to dental school who ask you for advice. And one of the things in my position that sometimes is a little uncomfortable is that as you guys age, you're going to feel like those guys' experience or application process is going to be like the one you went through. And it changes. It's different, right? We don't take as many 90-credit juniors as we used to, and so on and so forth. But what I was going to say is sometimes dentists will say things to a prospective candidate like, I learned how to be a great dentist at dental school. I did not learn anything about running my practice, ... So Brian loves business majors. The first part of that statement could potentially be true. Not as true today as it was maybe 25, 30, 35 years ago. But the part of because of that I love business majors, probably not true either. So I think the bottom line is when a student that's thinking about dental school, it certainly helps. You talk about hand skills, right? It helps to have a love for the sciences. If you don't love science, it's going to be tough in dental school, right? Every class that you have that's not necessarily a clinical class is going to be based in the upper division, human-related natural sciences. But mostly you should study in school what's going to allow you to enjoy and be good at, but you have to have a discipline to be strong in the sciences.
Great stuff.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. So, well, let's talk about the interview process, Brian. We're probably going to have you just kind of walk us through the whole thing, but what are some questions when you do have candidates and applicants sit down to interview? What are some questions you throw at them?
Yeah, you guys, I've been actually looking forward to this question because it's one of the things that has probably become, I don't necessarily know if it's a pet peeve of mine, but we now live in a world, this podcast for an old guy like me is a new deal, right? Social media has changed our world. So give me a little bit of time to ramble and I'll connect dots. One of the things that's become incredibly frustrating now, you guys came to Marquette at a time when you didn't really have to do a formal interview with the admissions committee to get accepted to our school. So
right.
It's weird. I'm not positive, but I think there are still probably a few dental schools, I could be wrong when I say this, that don't require a formal interview. I think certainly the vast majority do. Our dental school is almost 130 years old, and we've only been interviewing at Marquette really formally since 1999, 2000. The format that we interview now, and about interviewing, and I promise you'll get back to the question. I always think that people think of the interview process as this thing to be very nervous about, and that schools want to grind you and trick you, and I hope that's how every dental school that's not Marquette thinks about their interview day, their interview process. Our interview days and our interview process is without question the most important recruitment days of the year for us. You guys came from a long way away. You got exposed to us through me coming out there. Think about this virtual fair I just did, where some kid from San Diego got exposed to Marquette. He or she, they may not even know how to say Marquette. They may not even know where Wisconsin is on a map, but that's kind of where it starts. And then if that kid actually comes for an interview, having this mindset of what they're going to think when they get to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and see Marquette, I guarantee those people that when they're going home that day, if they have an opportunity to get accepted to our school, they're going to want to do it through the way in which that interview day goes. So the thing from a director of admissions perspective that's just begun to drive me crazy about it is that all candidates want to know is, what are the questions going to be? Tell me what the questions are going to be. And when we first started interviewing you guys, it would drive me crazy. We would interview guys, and then they'd go back to the admissions office, and they would start texting their friends what the questions would be. And I would get incensed, and I'd be thinking to myself, this guy's competing for a space with this other guy, and he's going to tell him what the interview questions are. But I can tell you this, that I've gotten really past that. I'm almost to the point now where I would pass our questions out. Because what I've learned is knowing what the questions are going to be has absolutely nothing to do with how well you're going to interview. And that's, I guess, one of the things I would say in this interview context. So let's go back to sort of answer your question specifically. Every school is going to have a philosophy or different ways of interviewing a candidate. We don't ask a lot of questions in my mind that are crazy, like, what do you know about, who's the prime minister of China, or that sort of pop culture kinds of stuff. What we're trying to get a sense of in an interview is what's in a person's head, what's in a person's heart, how do they think, what are their motivations for wanting to do this. That's for us what we feel helps us get a good fit for the kind of student. So, we don't ask questions like, if you have a Title IX patient and they have caries on the buccal side of number 19, what will your treatment plan be? That's a stupid interview question, right? Another stupid interview question is, if we admit you at Marquette, are you going to come? Those are not good questions. So I'll give you a couple of things that have been kind of, and I can tell you right now too, when you heard me go on my rant about social media, you guys probably know this. If a person goes online right now, it would take them less than 20 minutes to find out every question that every dental and medical school asked last year in their interviews. They're all over the internet. And it's like, you remember when you used to get old tests to study?
Yeah.
Tests? We don't have the inclination or the time to change our interview questions for each of the interview days that we do. So that information leaks out. We ask sometimes questions about some hypotheticals. We might ask a question in terms of trying to get a sense of how a student would think, or a dentist would think. You've got a busy day in your office. Your 3 o'clock appointment comes in and asks you, they say, "Doc, I want you to pull all of my teeth." What would you do? It's interesting to hear the answers to those questions. So let me give you an example. Let's say a person answers the question this way, and many people do. So now I'm getting your podcast, everyone's going to know not to do this. And what I would say is that the customer is always right. I pull all their teeth. That's the wrong answer, right?
Right.
Now, here's the interesting point. So if a candidate answers a question that way, which is clearly wrong, does that mean that we would deny them admission to our dental school? Is the wrong answer to a singular question the reason somebody doesn't get admitted? Probably not. But then it depends on what happens through the rest of the interview, right? Do you know what I'm saying? So the important thing to me in an interview, and maybe more important than the kinds of questions that we ask, is how a person prepares for the interview. I'm at a private dental school. There are people who come to interview at Marquette, and when we ask them how many schools they applied to, they'll say 23 schools. Ryder, how many schools did you apply to?
Initially, I applied to 11. Secondary applications, I think I sent in 5 or 6, if I remember right.
Troy?
Yeah, I was about the same. I think 10 initially and 4 or 5 to the secondaries.
And Marcus?
Yeah, about the same. It was about a dozen, and then probably another 3 or 4.
Yeah, and you guys know that at the time you were coming, and why Utah. We're rambling a little bit off this question, but there's context to it. Utah was fertile recruitment territory, right? Tons of people from schools in Utah applied to dental school. At that time, there were no dental schools in Utah. Why wouldn't a school like Marquette come and interview there and have a presence there? You had to leave the state for school. You might as well come to the place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Right.
So I think when people, and the average, there's a question later tonight that we'll talk about in terms of the cost of dental education, right? It's insane, and it's expensive to apply to dental school. But the average number of schools in 2016 that an ADSAS applicant applies to is 10 schools. It's almost $1,000 to apply to 10 dental schools. So we always joke, of course, behind the walls in offices like mine, is that if you're not very bright, but you're wealthy, what's your strategy? You're going to apply to 40 schools. It doesn't matter where I go. The more I apply to, somebody will take me, right? Yeah. That's not that smart a strategy. But if a person says, does it look bad that I applied to 20 schools? My answer would be no. But what it does in the interview contest is it's put pressure on you to answer this question for me. What do you know about my school? Do you know anything about my school? Or is the only reason that you're applying to my school is that when you did your research, you know that Marquette takes 50% of its students from out of state, and so you applied here, right? So I guess that I would always try to shift the focus. It's like when applicants to me are saying, tell me how to get in. What I try to say to them is, I want you to think about December when you have 5 offers of admission. How are you going to pick where you go? Now, not everybody always has 5 offers of admission, but a lot of people do, right? Cream rises to the top. So I think in preparation for interviewing, you can try to search and find out what the questions are going to be. But I'd spend more time learning about the school, knowing something about the school, knowing about what those schools use as the bullet points that they think differentiate themselves from other places. That becomes what I think is the best way to prepare for an interview, rather than knowing if I'm going to ask you, a certain question or not.
Wow, that is great information. That really is. And, for me, I knew a little bit about Marquette before I went there. I knew about Al McGuire and, basketball history, and I definitely heard of Marquette. But, people hear Milwaukee and they think, for some reason they think, why would I want to go to Milwaukee?
Right.
But for everybody that's listening, it is an awesome city. And I think Marcus and Troy would agree. There's culture there. There's history there. There's beaches there that people probably don't know about. And it is just a great city.
And there's a whole bunch of Packers fans.
Man, when I came to visit the school, I went to a Brewers game. That was awesome. They beat the White Sox. It was cool. People need to take a look at Milwaukee because it's a great city.
Yeah, there's no doubt that place has a lot to do with where you are. You guys came out of an LDS culture, right?
Yeah.
And so some people that are married, some people that have kids, some people that are going to have kids while they're in school. The quality of life and the environment in which you're going to be in while you're going to school relative to where it is, that's a huge part of the process. And cost as well, right? Milwaukee, Wisconsin's a Rust Belt city in the middle of the country. It doesn't cost as much to be in Milwaukee as it does to be in Vegas or San Francisco or New York City or Dallas. Those are things that students have to think about in terms of total cost. Kids from Chicago, Illinois can come 90 miles up the road to Marquette, and the cost of living difference between Milwaukee and Chicago makes cost of school significantly different.
Oh man, that's totally true.
Yeah. Brian, this is Troy. Can you kind of give us an idea, and I guess this is okay information, how many applicants about does Marquette get a year?
Yeah,
and, how many do you accept in a class? Is that fair question?
Yeah, and again, I'll give you some of my typical shtick. Remember now, Marquette's a private school, and so we get applications from all over the country. That's one of the things that I love about our school. There are certain schools, and I'm, of course, out here in the upper Midwest, and in the upper Midwest, that's Big Ten territory, right? Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio State. Those are schools that are taking students primarily from their own state. They don't probably have to work or recruit nationally as hard as we do, because we now have a class of 100 students at Marquette, and we know that 50, I got good at math. When we changed the class from 80 to 100, all of a sudden my mathematics got much better. 50% come from out of state, 50% in-state, 50% out. So that guy I talk about from San Diego that's looking at schools, if he's going to look outside the state of California for school, if he's smart, he's not going to apply to out-of-state schools that only took 4 or 5 out-of-state students, right? That was the message that we talked with you guys about, and you have to be savvy about that. So we get now somewhere between 2,500 and 2,700 applications a year. We get applications from all 50 states. And one of the things that semantically I talk about all the time is people say, hey, Brian, I hear you admit 100 students. I wish that were true. We matriculate 100 students. It's going to take us more than 100 offers of admission to get those 100 people to stick. We're accepting people from California who are also accepted to California schools, right? That's part of the recruitment struggle and battle is most people that get admitted have multiple options. That's not always true, but most of the time it is. We interview about 350 students, about 250 non-residents, and 100 in-state students. And then from that batch, we make our offers of admission. This year, it took us 170 offers, 170, to fill 100 spaces. And if you break that down, in Wisconsin, it took us 53 offers. 3 of our in-state students that we admitted went someplace else. So if you do the math, there's still probably 65, 66 non-resident students that we admit that we didn't get. But for a private dental school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, we're operating on a 65 to 70% yield on offers of admission. That's incredibly high. That's one of the things I'm most proud of. Marquette, for a lot of people, is a school that's not maybe necessarily always first choice, but it's high on their list, even if they're a non-resident student.
Absolutely. Well, we kind of talked a little bit about this one time, I think, in one of our other podcasts, but, Mark, we were the first graduating class out of the brand new school.
Right.
That was in 2003.
Right.
What have you seen as far as application numbers since you upgraded the school to the new school? Have you seen a lot more applications that way?
It's been an ebb and a flow, and it's kind of I always tell this story, and you guys maybe remember this. The year that we moved from the old building that we had been in for almost 90 years, 80 some years, into that brand new facility, as a kind of a hardcore recruiter, I was always, I didn't like that thing about if you build it, they will come. But it was awfully nice for people to walk into that place, and it still is. The building still holds up over time. If you guys came in to see it now, we just expanded the building 3 years ago. It's awesome. But the year we moved into that new school, we had a little under 1,700 applications to Marquette. And we were dancing around like leprechauns. That was about as many applications as Marquette had ever seen. 4 years after that, we had 3,300 applications for a class of 80 students. And then that sounded cool, but it was really difficult. The applicant pool was almost a third of everybody who was applying to dental school nationally was applying to Marquette. Marquette was a pretty sexy school during those days, and that was good. We've obviously now, for a lot of reasons, Marquette's probably not as sexy as it was at that time. There are other new schools, other places that have gone into place. Cost of education going up, cost of applying going up. And there were a lot of people that are applying to dental school at that time that weren't good candidates. So now we're back at that 2,700 level, and it's become more difficult because from top to bottom, the variance in applicants isn't as great as it used to be. The decisions are getting more difficult. But we're always going to get a lot of applications. And what's weird is when you think about it, now with this interview process, the critical element is to be one of those 350 people. We could say we have 5,000 applications. It doesn't really matter. It only matters if you get selected to do a formal interview. Then you're part of the people that are getting the fullest consideration that they can get.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. That's good information.
But so to remember, when you look at schools that have high application counts, it's usually going to be a private dental school. Schools that are entertaining applications from all over the country. The state schools, because they don't usually do that, aren't going to be producing as many applicants to schools.
Makes sense. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Like for your audience, remember that we get 2,700 apps. Everybody thinks that all of those come from Wisconsin. This year we got 220 applications from the state of Wisconsin. That's it. We get more applications from Utah than we get from Wisconsin.
Wow, that's interesting. So, Brian, you talked about how when we were applying to dental school, there wasn't a formal interview process, and then you switched to a formal interview process. And now tell us how technology has changed the interview process for you.
Well, technology's changed in a lot of ways. We talked a little bit before we went on the air about, we have the potential now if we invite somebody for an interview and they're not available to come on that day, but we can Skype interview with them. We have the potential to do that. I would much rather, and not just my old man uncomfortable comfortableness with technology, but we want you understand. We want to get people in that building. We want them to be able to see it. We want them to be able to experience all those things that break down some of the stereotypes that they think of what they would see when they would come. But social media, technology, all of that stuff, the reach, the way in which we're able to get at people, the way they're able to get at us. The initial search on stuff is basically all web-based now. Your website becomes a critical element to the process. So all of those things have changed a lot of what we do.
Very good. Have you seen the cost of a dental education changing the applicant pool at all? Has that changed or affected the number of applicants?
It's interesting. I mean, that's obviously for guys like us and women in dental admissions and in organized dental education, cost is a huge issue for everybody. To be honest, I would say, and at least for us at Marquette, we haven't seen cost dramatically shift things in a negative way. The way that cost has changed things, I think, is that it is the indebtedness, the debt that dental students leave with. You remember that, guys? That is affecting the choice of what people decide to do as it relates to where they're going to work and how they're going to work when they're done. But I think that we're right on the cusp of the best thing about dentistry. The easiest thing to sell about dentistry under the umbrella of healthcare is that this. Right now, if you go to dental school and you make it through dental school and you graduate, everybody has the opportunity to secure a pretty successful future. Everybody gets a job. It's different in law right now, right? You got any friends that are in law school or people that went through law school? It's hard for them to find work sometimes. So you have this educational investment. But right now, it's easy to sell that on the back side of that, you're going to have a job. You're not going to make $400,000 a year you get out of school. So we haven't seen a dramatic change. For example, as the cost of school and the cost of applying to dental school has increased, we haven't seen a decrease in the number of schools that people apply to, for example. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we watch all the time. And as a guy at a private school, I'm always telling people, if you're going to start to scratch schools off your list, don't scratch the out-of-state private schools off of your list. That's where you still have your best odds of getting into school if you're looking out of state. But I think sometimes there's this mindset. You guys have heard me say this because I've been saying it for a million years. Nobody can afford to go to dental school anywhere, right? Brian, I can't come to Marquette. I got to cancel, and I'm going to stay in state. And I get that, but they can't afford to stay at their. They're not going to pay for their in-state school out of their own pocket, right? A guy that's going to Roseman that went to BYU, he can't afford Roseman either. It's right in his own backyard. They're more expensive than we are.
Yeah.
So I never let cost be the thing that makes me think that that's the driver of the decision. If someone doesn't come, it's not about money. It's that we didn't convince them that was the best place to be. So right now, I think we're okay. I think we're teetering at a place where we might be able. If schools are silly and they keep jacking up costs ridiculously high, I think they're going to start to see it affect their application and interest numbers for sure.
Very good.
Well, Brian, why don't you tell us what the biggest changes have been in the last 15 or 20 years in dental school applications, just based on numbers, DAT scores, GPAs, gender, things like that? How have the dynamics changed?
Well, you guys know that, I think in terms of sort of those very broad-based things, I don't think there's been a tremendous amount of change. I think that dentistry has positioned itself extremely well. And I always have to be careful. I'm a dental guy, but I talk to lots of physicians that are unhappy with the way they have to practice and would rather see their kids go to dental school than med school. That's not true of everybody, but you guys are dentists, and I'm sure that when people come up to you and want to shadow you or ask you what you think, you're objective with them, but I bet you're always positive about the fact that you're happy, you're doing what you're doing, right? And that helps a guy like me tremendously. If everybody that's in the profession is telling people who are thinking about it not to do it, it's going to put a guy like me out of business. So I think the interest is there. I think dentistry has done a phenomenal job of making certain that we don't sell ourselves as a trade. Guys like me get offended when people say there's doctors and there's tooth carpenters, right? What we say is that there's physicians and there's dentists. You're both doctors. And then what happens in your mouth, what happens in your oral cavity is a lot to do with systemic health. And that's an important selling point sometimes to people who are on that cusp between medical or dental school. I think that the doctor-patient relationship in dentistry is incredibly unique. And I think that that's one of the things that sells a lot of people on dentistry. One of the changes we've seen, guys, in our work, based on pressure, based on things that we need to do, is to diversify the profession. That doesn't just necessarily mean bringing more underrepresented minorities to the profession. That's part of it, right? Create a workforce that looks like the patients that they're going to treat. You guys might not know this, but when we start in August, we're going to be 54% female in the dental school. So if your wives have been telling you that women are going to start running the world, they're right. They're going to start running dentistry for sure as well. So those are some of the things that have shifted. I think the quality of applicants, the cream rises to the top. One of the things I would tell you guys, and I guess I would share this in this greater context of somebody someday listening to this podcast that's thinking about dental school, we got a lot of people who are incredibly bright, smart. Academic acumen is not an issue. But I would have you guys reflect on days in dental school where it was really tough. Your brain is not probably the thing that you fell back on, right? It was just being tough, being resilient, sucking it up, and working hard. Dentistry is a lot about critique. And we get a lot of people that come to dental school today that haven't had to face a lot of obstacles. They've never had anything but an A since nap time in kindergarten. and when you get to dental school, it's tough. And someone tells you no. Someone tells you that you didn't do things as well as you would like. And they're not critiquing you. They're critiquing this work that you've done. So that resilience and those are things that I think that we're really looking for in our students. I'm not worried about our students not being smart enough to make it through school. I want them to have the grace under pressure and to be able to handle critique.
Yeah, those are great points. We've talked often about our first semester of dental school and how we had 14 finals in like 10 days or something, guys. Is that about right? And that's killer. And you hear that and you think, holy cow, the most I've had in undergrad is like 3 or 4. So that's totally true. You got to be mentally tough.
That's why when you meet with the director of admissions, you don't ever want to say, well, I'm not a very good tester. Right? Well, guess what? Go talk to a dentist and ask him how many tests they had to take in dental school. That's all you ever do, right?
It feels like it.
You're tested to the hilt.
Correct.
Yeah, that's totally true. I think mental, emotional toughness, it goes a long way in dental school, it seems like. And making some good friends.
Correct.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us why, if somebody that's listening right now is applying to dental school, why they should consider Marquette? And I know I took my wife to Milwaukee one time, and we went to Eddie Martini's and Bartolotta's, and she said she'll always go back to Milwaukee because of the food. But there's other selling points besides the food.
Yeah, we started talking tonight about kind of the package deal that makes a good applicant, and I guess that's the way that I always think about our school. I think about Marquette. I think that it's funny. Do you guys remember Jeannie Hoppy?
Yeah.
Jeannie Hoppy. We just had her retirement party last night. It was awesome. There were 200 people there, and I emceed the event last night, and it was. It made you proud to be part of our organization. Schools are brick and mortar. The thing that makes them special are the people. And I'm not under this weird thing that there's no other dental schools. Marquette's the only dental school. But I do know this. Since 1996, there's 13 new dental schools in the United States. They're not all good. And they're not all the same. And that's part of the responsibility of candidates to look at and to have a priority of what it is that actually makes a school a good school. I say silly things like, pretty soon you're going to be able to go to dental school in a strip mall. It doesn't mean that you should. And so I think for Marquette, the thing that I always talk about, and you guys, I don't want to ramble too much, but the substantive things that a director of admissions would talk about in terms of what they think makes a school good, I'm not really sure, quite frankly, are the things that sell people on coming to a school. I think what sells people on coming to a school is where it is, the community, the culture of the building, the environment inside the school, the relationship between faculty and students, the general, feeling that students who are there have. Would they do this again? It's so foreign for me to think, because at Marquette, you guys, know this, at any moment, at any time, someone can come up to a dental school at Marquette, a dental student, and say, how is it? And say, it stinks. I'm having the worst day I've ever had in my life. You guys probably are like everybody, that when you're going through it, you're too close to the sun to appreciate what you're learning and the skill sets that you have. But I bet you didn't take long once you were out to know how well you were trained, the quality of your skill set, competence, and confidence. That's what Marquette's always done. It's hard for me to say that. I get paid to say it. But what's nice is that it actually happens at our school. So I think curricularly, I think Marquette's probably got one of the most contemporary clinical curriculums in the United States. People always, don't believe it, but we were really the first school in the United States that broke that mold of 2 years of sitting in a lecture hall before you ever got into a clinic. Our students are doing a prosthodontics class in their first year of dental school.
Wow.
And a lot of times when people say, so what? What's the big deal? That's actually a good question. The reason why it's a big deal is that when you get out of dental school, you got to be able to do dentistry. Not 5 years after you're done, not after a GPR, not after an AEGD. At the point of graduation, are you ready to go? And so I always thought, but I don't know if you guys fish. How do you learn how to fish? Do you watch a PowerPoint, or do you get in a boat and you go fish? So that's kind of our feeling. How do you learn how to do clinical dentistry? You don't look at it on a screen. You go do it. But I think the strength of our school is the people. I think that we have tradition, we have history, we have established leadership at our school. And I think people, guys, I talk about this a lot. You probably became Packer fans a little bit when you're out here. The Packers are awesome because they've had a unique ownership, but they've had the same GM and they've had world-class quarterbacks for 25 years in a row. That's not a magic prescription for success. It's just most other people don't have that. We're not a dental school that's got a different dean every 2 years. Bill Lobb's the longest standing dean of anybody in the United States, and that's good because he's not resting on his laurels. He's not saying, let's just keep this thing the way it is. It's a moving target. We change it, we tweak it, we make it better all the time. Differentiation is a key. Students don't ever ask this, and they should, because it's the $64 million question, and that is, what do you do that nobody else does? And the answer to that question is probably nothing. But you got to get a sense. So for example, right, we talk about we're a clinical school, right, guys? People, I say, well, isn't every dental school a clinical school? The answer is no, they're not. Some have a different emphasis, a research emphasis. And so when people are looking at schools, they have to sort of have a sense of what it is that they're looking for to make certain that when they get to that school, it provides for them what they're looking for. So I just think we have a unique package. You guys have talked about Milwaukee a little bit tonight, and I agree. But no, I'm a homer. I'm from here. I live here. It's so awesome to live in a place where people come when they don't know much about you with a mindset that is always blown away when people come to see us. So yeah, it snows and it's cold at certain times of the year, but last week was 94 degrees in Milwaukee, and we're right on Lake Michigan, which helps us a lot. So we always invite people to come because we know when they come and see it, they're going to love the building, they're going to love the facility, they'll love the people, and they'll love the community that we happen to be part of.
Yeah, and it is cold there, but when you go to dental school, do you really want to say you went to San Diego and it was 70 degrees all the time? I like saying...
What I always tell people is we do go to dental school indoors.
Yeah. And when I tell people, like my first winter was like minus 30 with the wind chill, and they're like, oh, and we survived that, and it was awesome.
I would do something different.
Yeah.
I had an interesting experience, Brian, when I was interviewing at another school, and we got in the elevator, and I can't remember who was with us. It was one of the instructors, and he had stepped out, and I was just there with the student that was kind of showing me around the school. And he just leans over and he says, I want to tell you the honest truth. If you get accepted anywhere else, do not come here. Yeah. So, that said a lot to me because I'm like,
well, it does. Because again, remember, if you're hearing that, I think about this all the time. If you come to our school, and I think of you guys, and you guys are the best ambassadors and representatives of our program. You went through it, and now you're practicing, and you guys are in a unique position through the things that you're doing to influence the way. And it's not always necessarily just about pushing people our way. It's also about the power that comes with the knowledge of how to navigate the process. But your students, your current students, are without question your best or worst ambassadors. If students at a school are telling you bad things, the director of admissions in the suit and ties can't fix that. There's no possible way that you can do that. And think about that. When you've made a decision to come to a place, wouldn't you rather sort of think that you would, position yourself to a place and say, I'm glad I made this decision. So for someone to say, don't do it, that's tough, and that's something that I think you'd want to take to the bank. You want to find a place where people say, listen, this isn't perfect every day. It's expensive. It's tough. They expect much from you, but I love being here, and I wouldn't change my mind. And I think at Marquette, we're pretty fortunate to have that.
Yeah, I know Marcus and Troy and I, we sometimes, have tough days and we complain about dentistry and it is hard and this and that. It's hard no matter where you go to school, but I don't know that we've ever complained and said, "God, I wish I'd gone to dental school somewhere else." We had a great experience at Marquette.
Right.
We met there. The city, I can't stop talking about the city, but just love Milwaukee, and so it's just a great place to go.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I came out of dental school and I started associating with the practice that I now am a partnership in. And, I had 10 or 13 operative patients the first day I was practicing.
It's amazing.
I mean, it was insane. And, I jumped right in and I went with it. I did not feel like, boy, I wish Marquette would have taught me something else. I felt totally competent in what I was doing. Now, was I fast? Was I, did I need a little more education as far as, interacting with patients and stuff? Sure, I did, but I felt totally competent and I felt totally safe doing what I was doing. And I've actually had an associate that worked for me that came out of Marquette. We're kind of plugging Marquette tonight because we all like it and everything, but I had an associate that worked for us for a year out of Marquette, and he had the same experience. I know a gentleman who's practicing in a practice right across the street from me right now that graduated last year from Marquette. Same type of thing. So it's a fantastic clinical school. We've always been happy that we went out there, and the atmosphere was good, the people were good, everything was pretty nice out there. So
yeah, and I think that's something that hasn't changed, and I hope never does. That's an important part of making people think fondly of what happened during the years that they're there.
Yeah, a lot of people, I hear horror stories of their instructors being, kind of really mean on them and stuff like that. But, I don't know, Marcus, Ryder, you guys can speak too, but I've never felt like, even though that, they were tough on us at times and things like that, I didn't ever feel like it was derogatory. It was because they wanted us to learn more. I don't know if that's kind of what you guys felt too.
I felt the same thing.
Never condescending or anything like that. Yeah.
But I've heard horror stories.
Yeah.
You guys, there was we all live in glass houses. You guys, I don't know how much you've talked about the doctor-student network out there, which is sort of the blog that people can use. And for students out there that maybe hear this, if you think that directors of admission don't read that, I can tell you right now you're wrong. We read it all the time. We can't respond to it, so it becomes difficult. But there can sometimes be some things that get posted out there from people who've had a tough day that are very, very difficult for schools to sometimes rebound from. I know this, and this, of course, sounds like an old guy whittling on a porch telling stories about 900 years ago, but dental education today is far more constructive than it was probably 35 years ago. If things happen today the way they did then in terms of the critique, we'd have more lawyers walking around dental schools than anything else. But it is a tough process because, particularly clinical dentistry is all about critique, and it's like having a coach, right, that pushes you to the limit, trying to help you find your potentials. The degree that critique is constructive is much, much better. So you've got a lot of faculty members today that went through dental school at a time where they think what you guys went through was pretty easy. You have some people that go, I learned this way. That's how I'm going to teach. Most people that teach today would say, that's the way I learned. I'm never going to make somebody that I teach go through it the way that I did. So, but I do think that becomes a question that people want to ask at schools is how do they feel, that faculty-student relationship was in that context of learning and critique.
Well, Brian, we can't thank you enough for being on tonight. This has been just awesome information, I think. Marcus, Troy, is there anything else you want to ask Brian? Anything else you want to add tonight?
No, we appreciate, like Reiner said, this has been a tremendous podcast. I think we've added a lot of value to our listeners, and we appreciate your time.
Well, it's been a joy for me. It's awesome to reconnect. It would be. I would love for you guys the next time you're back in town. Make sure you let us know and come and say hello. But it's been my pleasure to do this, and I hope that we've been able to provide a little bit of insight in the process for your listeners.
Well, yeah, we can't thank you enough. Marcus, why don't you tell everybody where they can find us and get in touch with us? And Brian, after Marcus is done, if you want to give people some information about how to get in contact with you and Marquette, that'd be great too.
Sure. Yep.
You can reach us at dentalrealist@gmail.com. Email us any comments, questions that you might have. We're on Twitter @dentalrealist. You can also find us on Facebook, Dental Realist. We have a couple of books that we've written, So You Want to Be a Dentist and So Now You're a Dentist. Those two books can be found on a variety of places, Amazon.com, the iBook store. Our first book is available in hard copy if you want a copy of it. But we really appreciate your support and listening to the podcast, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, Brian, where can everybody get in touch with you?
Sure. The web address, obviously, for us is www.marquette.edu/dentistry. And if you ever want to call my office to get in touch, come out maybe for a visit, take a tour of the facility. We do that all the time. 800-445-5385.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thanks again for joining us tonight. This has just been awesome information. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all you joining us tonight and tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Dental Realist Podcast. Thanks.